Hwei is a unique champion with 10 abilities, which allows one to make a tier list ranking all of them, as you might want to know which ones you want to cast and when. Now, if you already know all of the abilities, feel free to skip right to the tier list at this timer, but if you'd like an in-depth explanation of every single one of those abilities, then stay tuned to the video, and I hope you enjoy. So we're actually going to start off by going over his E abilities instead of his Q abilities, as his Q abilities can synergize quite nicely with his E abilities, so it's just easier to go in that order. Now, the way Hwei works is when you press your E, you then are prompted with 3 more ability choices, and if you ever want to cancel any of your abilities, you can just press R again to get rid of it. As you see, I press W, and then I press R, and now I could switch to a different type of spell. Your E spells are going to be your CC spells. What your E does is it will prompt a projectile like this, and when you shoot it out, it will hit the first target, and it will fear them and slow them by 60%. Now, it is important to know that this can be blocked by minions or any other champion, so it can be a bit difficult to use in lane, but it can be quite nice if you are contesting these brushes with like an enemy support. You can look to try and poke them in that way. It can also be quite handy if you are, like, for instance, getting ganked from this angle. You could look to try and Q and run away, or if you are, for instance, like over here and you're getting ganked, you can try and fear off the enemy as you make your escape. Now, his second E, which will be his EW, will place down a zone, which will grant you vision over an area, and when a champion enters that area, they will be rooted for 1.4 second base, and it goes all the way up to 2 seconds at max rank, as well as dealing some damage. Also, the further it travels, the longer it will stay on the ground. So here I put it really close to me and it goes away quite quickly. And here you can see if I put it further away, it will last longer than when it was placed directly on top of me. Here you can see it only lasts like about a second. So you really want to try and prep this ability when you are using it. For instance, like when you are running away, if the enemies are coming to you, you can like put it far away from you and then run away. And as they come, they will be rooted by the ability. Again, if you are getting ganked, it's a good ability to run away. If you see them coming, you'll place it down there far away from you. It will last a while, and then they can't really walk there without getting rooted. And same if you are over here, you can throw it down there and easily peel away any ganks that are coming in. Then his final E is his EE, which will shoot out some claws and combine in the middle, and has a cast time of 0.35, so it's not instant, and the grab takes about 0.6 seconds for it to happen. You see in the middle, there's like a little zone, and that will slow enemies by, at the beginning, 40%, but scaling all the way up to 70% at max rank. And then it will pull all targets towards that area. So if I put it in between these two units, they won't get the initial slow, but then they'll be pulled towards it and get slowed that way. Now, his E are the CC abilities, and they're a bit complicated. But now we move on to the W abilities, which are a bit more utility based. And we're going to start off with his WQ, which puts down a zone kind of similar to like a Rumble ult, which will then speed up you and your allies in it. And it is 20% initially, scaling up to 30%, and it also scales with some of your AP. Next up we have his WW, which is a shield. You throw it out and it has a bit of range. Not the longest range, so like let's say I'm for instance here and my ADC is over there, I actually can't really reach him. I can reach him just barely. Gives an initial shield when placed right on top of you, which will be base 45, and it scales with 30% of your AP. So at level 1 it'll be 50 with your support item and your runes, and it gives your teammates half of that. So for the dummy, it'll only give a 25 health shield initially, and then a bit of a ticking one. And as you can see, that is extremely small. So the shield is best when used on Hwei himself rather than his teammate. Next up, he has his WE, which will give his next 3 abilities damage or his auto attacks. Here you can see I'm auto attacking and getting the damage. If I QE, it will also use up the effect and do the damage. And it also restores your mana, which is quite good as he can be quite mana hungry. So if you get all 3 procs, level 1, it will give you 135 mana, and it scales up to 195, but you do have to be able to use the 90 mana in order to cast it, so it's only really like a net gain of about, I think that's 45 mana in general. Then we are going to have his Q, which is going to be more of his generic damage spells. Yes, all of his E's do damage, but they do like 60 base plus 55% of your magic damage, while his Q's have more variable damage. His QQ will shoot out something that's kind of similar to a Karma RQ, where it's a little effect that will then explode. It's a bit smaller than Karma's, but it has the added benefit where it will do 4% of their max health damage at rank 1, and it goes all the way up to 6% max health damage at full rank. This ability will go through minions, but it will not go through champions, so it'll stop at the first person you hit. It's a good way to poke people when you're trying to hit them through the minions, but as you can see, the explosion radius is quite small, so unless both the enemy ADC and support are right next to each other, it'll be quite difficult to get that double proc off. Next up we have his QW, which is kind of similar to a Xerath W, where it will show an effect and then come raining down, and it has quite a bit of a delay before it does the explosion. The delay is 1 second, so you do kind of want to use it like behind people so that they have to walk into it, or like right as they are CSing so that it is harder for them to dodge it, because they'll have to like either cancel the CS or just tank it. And the range on this ability is rather ridiculous. Here you can see like I'm near my tower and I'm able to hit these people from way over there. It is really good if you're like roaming, as you can like stand in this corner pocket and already try to influence the fight without them being able to see you. You could even like try to snipe them when they're under their tower for some cheeky kills. Now the reason why I wanted to go over the E abilities before I went over the Q abilities is because the way his Q works is that if the target is isolated, or if they have been recently immobilized, they will take extra damage. If we just do it normally on both of them, then they're not isolated, they take the 83, but if you only hit one target, then they take that crit damage, and it is based on their missing health. Here you can see that it would normally do 84 damage, but it can do up to 168 damage based on the target's missing health. This is definitely the ability I think you always want to max first, as the cooldown goes down from 10 seconds to 6 seconds at max rank, as well as the maximum health damage going up and the percent maximum bonus damage going up a lot when you level up this ability. Next up he has his EE, which is very similar to a Rumble ult, and it has good range. It'll like show up first and then actually do the damage and the effect, which does give people a decent amount of time to react. You can kind of see it coming. You can go either left or right, so it is better if you're able to use it after people are already CC'd, because then you are more guaranteed to do that lingering damage and to hit them with that 30% slow. This ability will last for 2.5 seconds and do reduce damage to minions. Then we have his passive, where Hwei's damaging abilities against enemy champions mark them for 4 seconds, and hitting marked enemies with a second damaging ability creates an explosion underneath them, dealing 57 magic damage to all enemies in range. So a good damage would be using your E into something like your W, because it'll do the extra crit damage as they're immobilized, and it will do the passive explosion damage to them. Although you might not actually be fast enough to do it, because the CC chain is not that long. So the extra damage from the QW works with pretty much everything except for the EE, and you have to be really fast if you want to use it with the fear. Finally, he has his ultimate, which will fire a pretty quick and long range projectile towards an enemy. What it will do is then expand from the target every second, and finally exploding over 3 seconds, and it will initially slow them by 10%, scaling all the way up to 120%, which is a pretty crazy slow. It will also slow all the other targets around it. Now the explosion will occur once the effect is over or once the target is dead. So now that we actually know the abilities, I'm going to be trying to rate them for fun on a little tier list, and I'm going to be rating them as if I was playing support, as that'll be the next video I am doing, and that is kind of where my knowledge base is coming from. Now, because you are playing support, you can't max all of the abilities, and you definitely are going to want to max Q first, because the cooldown goes down from 10 seconds to 6 seconds, and the damage just goes up off the charts when you upgrade this ability. So I think no matter where you play Hwei, you pretty much have to level up Q first. Then I'm assuming you want to level up E second, as it lowers the cooldown of your CC, and CC is very strong, and it can also increase the slow amount as well as the root duration of your W and your E. Now you could argue that you want to level up your W if you want to be more utility, but one of the big downsides for me is that when you level it up, you only reduce the cooldown of it by 0.5 seconds. So at max rank, it goes from 18 seconds to 16 seconds, which seems rather weak to me and is not my favorite. That being said, let's rate his double Q as the first ability, and a basic ability that deals 6% max health damage is pretty solid, especially in the support role. It's not that hard to land in lane. You can also hit multiple people with it, which is quite effective. It goes through the minions. Like Karma, Ult Q, I think it is rather solid, and I'm actually going to put it in the OP tier because this ability will do a lot of damage in the game for you. The fact that it is only on a 6-second cooldown while doing 6% max health is pretty ridiculous. I don't think a lot of champions really have that in the game at the moment. It also scales pretty well with AP with 70%. And if you max it, it goes from 60 base damage to 180, which is just all pretty ridiculous. Good ability overall. Next up we have his QW, which is the very long projectile, kind of similar to like a Xerath ult. And I think this ability is really strong actually. If you can get a target low, then you can start doing a ton of that critical damage. You can see I only have 28 AP, and this ability has the potential to do 584 max magic damage based on missing health, which is pretty ridiculous in my opinion. The fact that its range is super duper long, allowing you to go for some crazy plays or flanks. I think this ability has really good potential. You can hide in the bush over here, and then you can see the mid laners fighting, and you can influence it from afar without even having to step out of the bush. Let's say you're in the bot lane and you're chilling and you can see that your jungler is getting invaded. You can pretty quickly actually influence the fight at red from all the way over at the dragon pit, dealing a ton of damage because the enemy jungler will be isolated. Or if your jungler has some CC, you can see them use it, and then you can use that QW to also get the enhanced damage. Now, as you saw from my testing earlier, it's a bit harder to do the enhanced damage yourself. But if you can get the enhanced damage from your teammates' CC, then this ability is absolutely ridiculous. Because of the range and how much damage it can do, I'm going to easily put it in the OP tier as well. A 6-second cooldown artillery fire like this is kind of similar almost to like a Kog'Maw ult as well. Sure, it can be dodged by players who are decent, but just having this constant threat being rained down on them, which if it hits an isolated target does so much damage, is really annoying. One thing I really like to do in the mid to late game is build Rylai's, and then you can really catch out opponents quite easily. If they're trying to run away from like a lane, you can chase them down with the W, putting it behind them, and then either they have to take the 30% slow or they have to walk back towards you, and then maybe you'll be able to catch them out with a WQ. Next up we have his QE, which is the Rumble ult and the most impressive maybe of his 3 basic abilities, as it has this great effect, but at the same time, because it kind of warns you that it's coming, you can pretty much easily sidestep it, either left or right, based on where you need to juke it. It does do a good amount of damage to targets that are in it. In team fights, this ability is really strong because you can just sit on top of whatever is going on if somebody is getting CC'd. The only problem with this ultimate is that it isn't the longest range, as it has to start from Hwei, while Rumble ult you can start from further away and actually really extend the range of it and place it better. This one you can actually get into quite a lot of danger if you're trying to use it. It does have longer range than your QE, but it takes a while for it to actually reach that range, while your QE will travel a lot faster, making it better and more reliable for long distance poke from what I have found. There's gonna be very few instances where you actually do manage to like snipe someone with the last tick of it, unless they're AFK, while hitting someone with a double Q is a lot easier as it is so much faster. For these reasons, I'm going to put his E, Molten Fissure, in the fine tier. It is very good in late game team fights, but it is a bit disappointing in lane from what I have found. I can imagine in mid lane it is a lot better for you when you're trying to clear out the minion waves, as it will be much more essential, but when considering the support role, it is a bit lackluster. Now we'll take a look at his W's, and the first one we have is his WQ, which places down this big zone where you get movement speed, and it's pretty much that's it. Quite simple, but I actually think this ability is very strong. You can use it to bring your team faster to objectives, to get out of places, just to move around the map. Quite a solid ability, and I'm going to put it in the strong tier. The cooldown on it is really long though, at 18 seconds, so you don't want to just willy-nilly use it. You do kind of want to be strategic about it. You can use it pretty much right as you get out of base, but by the time you return to lane, you will just barely have your W back up, if you will even have it at all. Now your next W is going to be your WW, which is going to be your shield, and when you put it on yourself, you get the initial shield of 45 plus 30% AP. And when you use it on a teammate, they only get half of the shield initially and half of the ticking shield. And honestly, I think this ability is pretty terrible. Here you can see I'm already at level 11, and sure, I only have 1 point in it. And the shield is absolutely pitiful. Like, what is that shield? It's 107, no, it's a 50 level shield. Sure, I don't have like any AP at the moment. Now, hypothetically, you do have a ton of AP, like 821, which you'll never have at level 11. Then the shield is a lot better, but it is only still 200 actually for your ally. It looks really big, but they only have 1,000 health, so 250 shield while having 820 AP is like maybe 1 Caitlyn like auto attack, which is okay, but it's nothing too crazy. The shield on yourself is going to be a lot better, where it's going to be 500 over the entire duration, but the initial one will only be 291. The best way to use the W, I think, is to place it like right in front of you so you do get into it and you can walk through it to get the shield. The dream is to be able to like fight while you're in it, but most of the time people won't like agree to fight you like this. They'll see you have the shield and just walk away, so you won't actually get the full effect of it, as you'll have to walk out of it in order to chase them. I think the fact that it only gives 50% of the shield to your allies is rather weak in general. Even if you max this ability, the shield doesn't get too crazy, and you'd always max this last. And the shield, even with some CDR, is still on a 12-second cooldown. And a 12-second shield with having 800 AP being only 250 is nothing really that amazing. It's really good, again, for Hwei himself, but if you're trying to shield your teammates, it is quite lackluster, and I just think there are better options for when you are wanting to use your W, like for instance that WQ, which you can see with all this AP is now giving 36% movement speed to everybody, so you might actually be able to kite and survive better with that extra movement speed instead of that shield. So I'll be placing this shield in the bad tier. Again, this will be controversial, but if you've played Hwei yourself, you will kind of realize that the shield is very underwhelming. I've played against a lot of Hweis. I have never once been annoyed by this shield. I've never been affected by it. I've never even really noticed it. I just think there's too much damage in the late game, and the game is just too fast in general for a shield with this cast time and this like channel effect to be that effective. For the last of his W's, we have his WE, which gives you the mana back when you auto attack, and it gives you the extra damage on your spells. This ability is solid. It's nothing too special. You kind of really need it because he is so mana hungry with his Q costing 120 at max. So it is a pretty essential part of this kit. It's probably going to be the one you're going to use the most in lane, but because it's on such a long cooldown, it is a bit annoying as well. When it comes to rating it for the support role, I'm going to put it in the sure tier. Normally, it feels kind of bad to have to waste his whole W on just gaining mana back. You'd much rather use the playmaking of his movement speed, in my opinion. If that was the only option here, the ability would be better, but because you have the movement speed or even the shield in cases where you do want to fight more, like the E already does more damage than you would ever gain from the shield, which further shows you why I'm not the biggest fan of the shield, and it definitely does more to the person that you are trying to shield if it's not yourself. Now we'll rate his CC abilities, and we'll start with his EQ, which is the fear. and it is a decently fast projectile. The fear effect is really good. The problem is it does get blocked by minions, which does make it weaker, but the effect is still quite strong in general, and I'm a big fan of it. If it was more consistent, like a Fiddlesticks Q, I'd definitely put it in OP tier, but because it is a skill shot that can be juked, I'm going to put it just in the strong tier. I really like how long the range is. You can do a lot of plays, you can look for a lot of picks using this ability, so overall, very good. Next up, we have his QE, which is the ability that throws out the zone, and once an enemy champion gets near it, it will then root them, and again, it lasts longer based on how far you throw it out. The biggest problem with this that's very annoying in lane is that if you throw it out and the enemy champion is not actually the closest thing to it, the minions won't get the effect. It only proc if an enemy champion is there, so these minions will not affect it. But it is kind of hard to get the enemy champion to be the one who's rooted, especially because they'll just walk back and have the minion tank it instead. It's alright, like in these bushes for making plays. Like let's say that the enemy you want to get is sitting in this bush and you're getting a gank. You can run up and throw it over here, and then they'll have to run up, and then they can get guaranteed rooted. And in that case, it is quite strong. Or if you're running away from a play, you can put it in front of you in order to get the root. But there's so much mobility in the game, and there's a lot of like tenacity where the root isn't that long. At max rank, it does get up to 2, but it can take a while for you to get that max rank. And just in general, I'm going to put this ability in the fine tier. You're not going to use it a lot, you'll find. You'll actually be surprised at how little you use this ability. You're probably more likely to use your QE instead, or you're going to try and make plays with EQ I meant to say. It's kind of hard to keep track of it, just because those are more reliable forms of CC, because enemies can just clearly see the W zone. It's more just like you're being like, okay, you can't walk here at the moment, but they don't have to walk it this area. They can just walk around it, which doesn't take that long for them to do, especially because there is a pretty long cast time as well before it all gets set up. His final basic ability is his double E, which are the really cool claws that pull the target towards the center. My biggest problem with this is it's not as long range as you would want it to be. It would be nicer if it was longer range, but then of course it would be a lot more OP. It's nice that it slows in the middle. It's quite easy for you to miss this ability if you're not careful, and because there's so much mobility in the game, they can just dash out of it or just walk out of it. So it does take a bit of like planning or like baiting. Like you might have to put it behind them, or if they're gonna juke, put it in front of them. It is quite a fun ability. It's quite versatile. It has decent AoE CC potential, and for all these reasons, I'm going to be putting this ability in the strong tier, but definitely at the bottom. This ability is really good around dragon fights or objectives, in more controlled fights where you have teammates who are able to set you up to land this ability. Because if you're just looking to land it on like a Zed or a Katarina, you will never ever land it. And actually for that reason, I'm going to put it down into fine tier, but the highest level of fine tier, because it is quite tricky to land it on all the mobile characters that are currently in the game. If a Yone is running at you at Mach speed, you can hopefully hit him with this, but that might not even be enough CC to deter him, as it only slows him by 70%. For a little bit of time. Let's see how long it lasts. Okay, it lasts a little bit, but honestly, you would much rather have like point and click CC nowadays as champions become more and more mobile. Now we'll rate his passive, which is honestly just extra damage if you're able to land 2 abilities, and it is solid. It's not too hard to land like 2 abilities if you get it down. Hwei definitely is going to be a very high skill based champion in order for you to maximize the passive and just all of his combos in general. You can also proc it with your E for an even easier way to make the explosion happen. So there's a lot of ways to do it, and just doing that little bit extra damage, a little bit extra splash to the bot lane is quite nice. And I'm gonna put it in the fine tier at the highest. maybe even the strong tier. It is kind of a lot of his identity. Honestly, in the late game with all the dragon fights that are happening and just team fights in general, having extra splash damage just from a passive is pretty nice indeed. Finally, we have his ultimate. And honestly, this ability is very strong. To have this lingering effect that can slow up to 120% is quite good. It's really good against tanks, actually, as it lasts 3 seconds, and 120% slow on a tank is very powerful. That's what's nice about the ability. It doesn't really matter who you hit it on. Sure, you would like to hit it on a priority target, but as long as you get it into a team fight, it will cause this huge area where enemies don't want to be, and it will do a lot of damage and slow them, which can easily win you a fight around Baron or Dragon. So I'm definitely going to put it in the strong tier. It's not an OP ultimate compared to like other people's ultimates. I think the fact that his QW is like a Xerath ult on 6-second cooldown is pretty good and it does a bunch of damage, and the basic Q doing this 6% max health damage is worthy of being considered more OP. But his ultimate is a very fine ability, but nothing too crazy in today's League of Legends, but definitely nothing too weak either. Well, thank you guys so much for watching. Here is my final tier list. Let me know what you guys think about Hwei when he comes out tomorrow, what you guys think about his abilities, as it could be completely different than mine. You guys are going to be maybe playing him more in the mid lane, which is his desired role. It kind of makes sense, as the shield is definitely much more centric around himself than on a ally. But I definitely think he has a lot of merit in the support role, and I actually will have a video talking about just how viable I think he is in the support role coming out tomorrow. So make sure to subscribe if you'd be interested in that. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. Leave it a like if you enjoyed it, and I want to wish you the best of luck when you're trying out Hwei yourself. Thanks for watching.